Hey, hello everyone. Tony Baker here from the Theology Studio. I'm here with CJ Metters.
Hey, I'm CJ, folks. I am a Master of Divinity, if you can believe that. Recently graduated from SSW.
Hooray!
Yeah. Tony asked me to put together a video from Chicago, our trip to the American Academy of Religion.
Also called the Theology Studio Prom, from those who were there.
Yeah, so what I did was took a little of that video and took a song and chopped some things together, just so you could get an idea of what the gathering was like, and maybe have a little entertainment as well.
Yeah, I just see here from what CJ's done. You're not getting a lot of content. You won't get we didn't put together a long video of all the conversations that we had, but just an idea, just some short audio clips of us talking and having some fun together, and just kind of proof for posterity that there was such a thing as a Theology Studio gathering in Chicago that year. The gathering that we had at a church near the convention center, we gathered and had as a topic of conversation the future of systematic theology. And I asked especially three people to share some comments with us that would get the conversation started, those being Sarah Coakley, Stephen Fowle, and Paul DeHart. And all of three of them were gracious enough to show up and to give some just off-the-cuff remarks about what they took to be important about theological work now and heading into the future, and what they took to be the key issues and problems that systematic theology was going to be wrestling with. And while this was going on, CJ was running around with a video camera getting some shots, and then that generated a conversation that, I don't know, how long did that go on? 2-3 hours probably?
Yeah, it was probably 2.5 hours.
Until we'd used up all of our time and they ran us out of the building anyhow.
That's right. We were there a little bit longer than the praise band underneath.
Yeah, that's right. There was Korean praise band music coming up through the floorboards, which is part of the reason why we can't do a lot of audio here. But
Right.
I mean, it was an interesting. It would make for interesting audio to see sort of Sarah Coakley's mouth moving in Korean praise music, coming out of it.
Indeed, yes.
CJ, do you remember what do you remember about the conversation itself, and maybe what the direction the conversation took, or any of the three speakers that we had?
Well, yeah, I remember Sarah Coakley's comments about the future of systematic theology having to at least satisfy three conditions. And those conditions she raised were, first, a Heideggerian condition of anytime you talk about systematic theology and use the word system, then you're putting a cage, if you will, around God, which can be problematic.
Right. I think she used the phrase "the fantasy of containment."
Right.
Yeah. So that sort of postmodern critique of the idea of systems as a whole, systems in general. What do you do with a discipline that's known by a term that's now become, after Heidegger, problematic?
That's right. And then the other objection she raised was from the feminist perspective of it being phallocentric, and it's essentially related to the last objection. Is this a move again to contain, to constrain in some way, to sort of
right.
to silence the move to make a system out of things? And then finally, the last point she brought up was the perspective of the liberationist. This move to create a system oftentimes will leave out the voices on those in the margins.
Right. So the future of systematic theology, she was suggesting, would have to deal with really a critique of systems themselves, right, from those three perspectives, from the Heideggerian, the feminist, and the liberationist perspective. I love the language that she used about systematic theology as being about how all the bits fit together.
Right.
As she said, but then also about the question of, okay, now that we're seeing the bits fit together, how does that change your life? How is that transformative?
Exactly. What practical impact does it have in a Christian context on Christian ministry?
Yeah.
How does all of this actually matter on the ground?
Yeah, I was maybe a bit surprised. I don't know if you were, but I was a bit surprised in a good way that's where really the conversation went, and I think she started a lot of that. But when we opened up the floor and the 40 or so folks around the room were sharing ideas and talking and asking each other questions and making comments, a lot of it had to do with the places where scholarly academic work meets pastoral practical work.
Right.
Where does it meet a life of prayer? Where does it meet a life of ministry? That sort of thing.
Yeah, and I wonder if the Korean band didn't actually have some kind of impact on us subconsciously,
That's right.
because here is ministry actually happening downstairs.
That's right.
And here
Theology
we
is
are-
supposed to praise.
That's right, and here we are up in the ether talking
Yeah.
about how it might happen when it's
Yeah.
actually happening.
That's funny. I hadn't made the connection. Stephen Fowle talked, and we have him. We did our interview also that you can find on the website here. We did our interview a day or two after this, I think, with Stephen Fowle. Scott and I did. But he talked a lot about the same sorts of things. How systematic theology in the department at Loyola has taken on a particular kind of ethos because it's become this interdisciplinary course. They're gathered around common texts, and you have Bible scholars and ethicists and church historians and systematic theologians who are all teaching intro to theology, and so really gathering the common wisdom from what can be fragmented disciplines and pulling them together in really interesting, unique ways. He talked about the way that departmental lunches had changed completely the feel of what it was like to work there at Loyola.
Right.
I remember.
Much more camaraderie, and
Yeah.
much more commonality and subject matter.
Yeah, really sort of inspiring. Yeah, and then finally we heard from Paul DeHart. And one of the things that I led with was the idea that systematic theology may be changing, that it may be getting away from sort of cottage industries gathered around the big mind or the one big figure. And this I take to be a good thing. And I think when Professor DeHart made his comments, he was sort of building on that a bit and saying it's still very important to have a group of people who can sort of speak in-house about what Calvin thought, or what
Right.
Barth thought, or what Aquinas thought. But he said, I see this work as preliminary to the real move of systematic theology, which is to take those conversations and really sort of, offer them as wisdom for Christians and for churches, living and working today.
Right, to move beyond the academy. The role of the faculty person is to train the community so that they can discern for themselves how to live before God under contemporary conditions in light of this wisdom that's being given. So I think that's an interesting way of shifting the goal of systematic theology is actually a communal goal, not just knowledge for knowledge's sake.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that again tied in with the sort of the practical pastoral focus. And it wasn't, that was interesting. It wasn't practical instead of theoretical.
Right.
We weren't saying what systematic theology needs to do is quit trying to figure Thomas Aquinas out and talk about, how to be pastoral counselors or something like that. It was, no, this rigorous textual work, but with a telos, focused
Right.
on,
Right.
How is this the kind of wisdom that will be transformative?
With an intrinsic connection to the practical.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So it gave a nice sort of surprising, all of this kind of gave a surprising focus to a conversation that really, when we dreamed it up, we just thought, let's ask what seems to be possibly a good question and gather some people with some possibly good ideas about how to answer it. And it turned out to really have a focus and have some sort of critical teeth of people coming together and saying, yeah, here's what theology needs to do in the future. It needs to ask questions about how the bits fit together, but how those are transformative for communities, for individuals, for people. So that was an interesting sort
Right.
of way that the evening turned.
It was, and it was quite an enjoyable evening. And if we would like to go to the video now, would you?
Yeah,
All right.
take us to the video.
I
CJ.
think we'll do that then. This is a production of the Theology Studio.
Thank you.
Communication of the highest quality at this level
ourselves as participants in a common task.
Community of people who can discern together things about both the content of the field and the vocation of the theologian.
Generally, communication should be well considered, spiritually mature, and discerning.